You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Human nature often drives us to seek new and improved ways of doing things, putting ideas into action. Yet despite its crucial role, innovation hasn't always garnered the scholarly focus it deserves. At the heart of every technology transfer process lies the spark of novel innovation. Today, I'm thrilled to have Joy Goswami, Senior Director of Corporate Engagement at Johns Hopkins University, joining us to discuss the power of innovation. Joy collaborates with senior leaders at the Whiting School of Engineering to provide strategic leadership in research, translation, and educational activities. Leading the Office of Corporate Engagement, he fosters university-wide programs for deeper engagement among JHU researchers, industry partners, and governmental agencies worldwide. As a registered patent agent, he brings expertise in science, business, and patent law, contributing significantly to initiatives like the SBIR STTR program at NIH. Currently, Joy serves as the chair-elect of Autumn, promoting global academic research and innovation. Welcome, Joy. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Pleasure being here.
Yeah, and we have a great topic that we're talking about today. We're talking about the power of innovation. And I think maybe the best place to kick this discussion off today, Joy, is for you to tell us what exactly do we mean when we talk about innovation in the context of academic technology transfer? And also, why is it so important?
Sure, Lisa. As you know, innovation, so we're all tech transfer professionals here, and then innovation is obviously the cornerstone of what we do for our bread and butter, so to speak. But innovation has been the cornerstone of human development in general. So sometimes, when we speak a little bit about how we got here, the basis of us getting here is because of the fact that we are human beings. And as human beings, and since the time we've evolved as human beings, as bipedal animals, and have freed up our hands, so to speak, we make things, and our nature has been to seek new and improved ways of putting ideas into action. Yet, despite the crucial role of innovation really hasn't always garnered the scholarly focus it deserves. And sometimes I think you and I and everyone, for that matter, take things for granted. And the layers and layers of innovation that we are really, at this point in time, beneficiary of is something we don't probably give enough scholarly focus. And so I thought this topic was a good segue for us to discuss, particularly when our audience are mostly from the tech transfer world handling innovations. And so, in my opinion, this could be the general meaning of what it is in terms of how we are going to be covering this topic today. Again, just sit back and think about it. Technology is everywhere. Look around your room, you're sitting in a nice, comfortable chair. The chair was invented by human beings. The climate control office you're sitting in, the air conditioner that's blowing on you, the pen you're handling, the computer, the telecommunication, the AV signals, for instance, just the way we are communicating today. The cup of coffee that I'm drinking, perhaps from Keurig, is all technology that we are sort of engulfed in. Sitting in the comfort of our living rooms and flipping a button to eventually get towards the Olympics, happening thousands and thousands of miles away in real time, is all technology. A whopping 250,000 patents in our cell phone alone. Can you imagine that? We never even think about it. We just pick up and then call our neighbors and our friends and family on a cell phone without realizing how much human intervention has gone into developing just the cell phone. So again, innovation is everywhere. It's there all around us. We probably take a lot of things for granted. And this is a vast topic that we can obviously talk in a lot of length, maybe in this or several other podcasts. But at this point in time, of course, I want to confine the discussions to technology transfer and the role of innovation in technology transfer. So again, to get one thing out of the way right now, and this is what I do when I teach a class, is provide the distinction between invention and innovation right from the get-go. So the thinnest street of what invention is that it's a solution to a problem. So we eventually invent things, but they may not necessarily have a commercial value. And so innovation is a little bit distinct from invention in that it is a commercially successful use of an invention. So that's something we need to bear in mind because invention without commensurate innovation really doesn't help us in the tech transfer world. And having said that, our job as tech transfer professionals is to make sure that we handle innovations in the way that we can take it to the commercial marketplace. So it becomes a good segue for us to talk maybe a little bit about what innovations are and how we handle it and how we move forward with doing what we do best, which is taking those innovations to the marketplace to create some impact.
Absolutely. And, that leads me to ask, there's all different types of innovation. There's products, there's processes, there's business model innovations. How do all these different types of innovations apply to universities?
Right. Again, to step back here. So we all know the classic model of tech transfer. The way we eventually handle an innovation is when we have an invention disclosure come into the door. And that's really the starting point for tech transfer to happen. And then it takes its own course and then moves forward from the invention disclosure all the way to hopefully commercialization of the technology. And then it's reaching the common man as a product that they can use. But the starting point is what we are going to be talking of today. And we don't usually entertain faculty members to come to our office by saying that we want a report of innovation. We say we want a report of invention or an invention disclosure. We don't call it an innovation disclosure because we leave it to the faculty to make a discretionary judgment of whether what they're giving to us is actually an invention or innovation. However, obviously, like I mentioned from the description and the definition that we discussed earlier, that innovation is what we're looking at. So what we typically do is, again, when we get that invention disclosure, and again, this is a 101 for many tech transfer professionals who have done this several times. This will be just, obviously a walk in the park. But when we look at an invention disclosure, we try to take a look at it from various angles. And again, I've been working in the academic tech transfer for nearly 20 years now. So every university does it differently, but I'll just give you a general idea of how we do it in that when we eventually take a look at the invention disclosure, we chop it up into various segments and we actually plug it into what we call an assessment technology canvas, which is basically nothing but a whiteboard with different boxes. And we try to put in as much information that we can gather from what we get from the invention disclosure and discussing with the faculty member about that particular disclosure that we have. So the first of the things that we have in the category, and there are several things, and I'll break it up in three broad categories, is understanding the innovation. The second is, of course, the classification of the innovation. And the third is some additional details, which actually has 10 different subparts, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But the idea of understanding the innovation is very critical because that becomes, again, the platform for us to eventually make a judgment of whether this invention is good or bad. Now, I'll quickly break in here to give you a general segue. So like I said, every university is different. The number of disclosure, the amount of research they do is different. I speak of Johns Hopkins because it's one of the largest among the larger of the tech transfer offices we have, and we get disclosures in the order of upwards of 400 every year. So there's a lot that we have to eventually digest. On the other side of the spectrum, of course, there are some universities that have less number of invention disclosures. But regardless of what it is, the idea of whether it's a Johns Hopkins or Ball State University in New Jersey, the idea of handling these disclosures is the same, that we want to eventually take it from the point where the innovator has given it to us, the inventor has given it to us, and we want to take it on to commercializing it. So we kind of chop it up and put these classifications in place. And the first thing, like I mentioned, is where we understand the innovation. And as the understandability of the innovation is concerned, we kind of drive it to figure out whether this innovation is a product or a process to begin with. And Lisa, you're an attorney yourself. You know that the largest number of legal protection that we do for these inventions is around patents, and there are basically four kinds of patent protection that we can get around some inventions. These include process, composition of matter, articles of manufacture, and machines.
Yeah, the statutory classes of inventions. Yep. Section 101. Yep.
Section 101, exactly. So we basically, again, first thing we do in trying to understand the invention is whether it falls in any of the four categories. Mostly it is in the process category. This is something we get for the most part, but there are, once in a while we are surprised when we get some that fall in the category where it is the invention is more of a product. In other words, a composition of matter, which can eventually become a new chemical or a new drug molecule, or it can be a new polymer or a microorganism for that matter, if that's obviously been intervened by human hands in manipulating it in some way. So we eventually get that to get a sense of where we are with that invention itself and what kind of invention it is. And once it does fall into a category where we are fairly confident that we can get a legal protection, we then move into classifying the innovation. And classification is also in four classes. And again, this is 101 for those who've done it all the time, that there are basically sustaining, discontinuous, disruptive, and breakthrough technologies. What are sustaining? Very simple. It's basically if you have a technology that has an incremental improvement. Somebody has given us a 2-blade razor, and then the inventor comes and says, I have a 3-blade. So if it's that, it's an incremental. Discontinuous one is where it represents advanced capabilities that didn't exist before. So moving from, let's say, a typewriter to a computer here. A typewriter was a mono, you just type in, there was no memory, and a computer is the next best. So there are various discontinuous technologies we can get. Disruptive is the one, and breakthrough for that matter. These two are the ones that are very, very critical for us. Disruptive being the technologies that create new markets and have a big value proposition. Example is the smartphone. As you recall, earlier times we had the BlackBerry, we moved into the smartphone. So that was a huge jump. 3D printing, for instance, apps like Uber and Airbnb, Netflix, these are all the disruptive ones. And as you all know, tech transfer professionals are hungry to get these because those are the ones that really earn the big buck. And if we can get into a disruptive category, that's great. And finally, the breakthrough, which is, the very, very odd ones like, drones, for instance, or drug like Ozempic that Novo Nordisk has for weight reduction, or the CRISPR-Cas technology, for instance. And these are the breakthrough ones. So again, the big picture is that we try to classify these innovations into these buckets. And then once these are put in, we use this matrix to eventually populate it as much as possible to the best of our capacity, which sometimes and most often, in fact, goes beyond what the invention disclosure provides us with. And in due course, then we kind of get the innovation to a place where we feel more confident in handling it. So again, a long answer to a short question. All I wanted to again drive in is that tech transfer professionals have a lot of responsibility in making sure that they can eventually categorize the technology from the get-go and only take ones that are of a fair amount value, particularly in offices like ours, where we try to deselect and not, use resources where it might not be necessary only because the technology is not of as much of a value proposition as it would be.
Absolutely. No, that was a fantastic explanation. So thank you for that. And one of the areas that I'm interested in exploring with you has to do with mindset. We hear about mindset in a lot of different areas and applied to a lot of different industries. So for academic researchers, what kind of mindset do you think is crucial to foster innovation? And how do you think universities can help nurture this type of mindset?
Yeah, Lisa, that's a good question and a tough nut to crack.
Yes.
So whenever we talk about academic researchers, fundamentally, again, they're researchers. So that's something we have to always keep in mind. And we have to obviously work in the university setup under the confines of an academic institution that is basically serving the public good. It is an educational institution, not for profit. And our mandate is basically to dissipate knowledge. It's funny that I come from a family, and I'll quickly give you a personal anecdote here. I come from a family where my grandfather was a mathematician. My father was a microbiologist. And then I am, of course, the next generation who is a tech transfer professional. So when my grandfather was alive and he used to tell me all the cool mathematical tools, his idea of doing academic research was only to serve the public and to teach students. And he was always of the opinion that he should eventually give off that kind of an educational acumen that he has to the rest of the people. So it's the acumen of giving off. My dad was next generation. Of course, he was a microbiologist himself. And he actually had 5 patents, one of which got licensed. So in another generation, we eventually found that, and of course, he was not, he didn't start off as somebody who liked patents very much, but maybe I told or caught him into this kind of a web in trying to convince him that patents are good and get him to do what he did. But he eventually did become one. But what I see within my family is the move or the interest of academicians to move from a direction where they are simply doing research and dissipating the knowledge to the rest of the world to somebody who feels that my research should have an impact on society. And that's what my father was. And he believed in the fact that if I'm doing some research or if I'm doing something productive, then that should have a translational value. Otherwise, the research is not good enough. So when I'm talking about my personal story here, it's basically to highlight the fact that some professors, again, in university setups will always be, the academic professors who do not believe in patents, who do not believe in protecting things or anticipating it to the rest of the world for making profit or making commercial products. I personally think that you cannot do much with them. Again, in the academic setup, they are what they are. And to me, they are people who should not be touched and they should be just left alone. We have had situations where we tried to drag them into having them file patents around their technology, and it's been a nightmare because they just haven't been cooperative and participant. You have to also, as a tech transfer professional, realize that the cooperation of these faculty members will have to last not just at the time when they disclose the invention, but through the enforceable life of the patent, which is 20 years. So they have to eventually stay with you and the company that you have licensed the technology for that long time. So you have to eventually make sure that they are left alone. But then you have, on the other side, the translational researchers who really love working in the translational space, and we are usually use them as our ambassadors to try and coach the other generation, the newer generation, and their peers to talk about all the good things that come out from the translation that they're done and the patents that they're filed. So we, as a tech transfer office, try to educate them. We tell them, all the good stuff that comes out of technology transfer, and it's a very organic way of trying and instilling the mindset into the ecosystem of a university. So it's a hard nut to crack, as I mentioned. But again, I always also think that the tech transfer office is a model that is similar to a restaurant business, that if a faculty likes us, they come, they taste us, they get nice benefits from working with us, and then they go back and there is a repeat customer.
A few weeks ago, we had Galen Anderson on, and I know you know her well. And one of the things she talked about, having moved from tech transfer into industry, was she has been able in industry to spend more time with some of the researchers at her company. And she wishes she had been able to do that back when she was in tech transfer. And to your point about, there are certain people like your grandfather who were just pure academic researchers and they were happy with that, versus your father, who was someone interested in translating it out. And it reminded me what Galen said, and it was some of her advice, was get to know your researchers. And like you said, to your point, you know which ones who are just going to be pure, academic researchers versus the ones who are going to, perhaps have that potential or already do have that potential to be repeat customers, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you have any stories or personal experiences that you've encountered at JHU that highlight the importance of mindset in driving innovation?
Yeah. And I think, again, for the most part, I think I have several experiences, and it doesn't just come from my Hopkins times, but I've also been consultant with various universities where I've helped them either to start a tech transfer office where it didn't exist at all, and this is mostly in the global arena, or situations where the number of disclosures in their offices have been so little that they want somehow to instill a culture of translation. And so in either cases, it's been obviously tough for all these universities to eventually get to terms with doing what they've done, because it again has to be organic and it's cultural, and it's and something that you cannot enforce on faculty is the hardest thing to eventually get into. But again, from my experience, there's several experiences I have, and one that I keep talking about is while I was at University of Delaware. This is prior to my days in Johns Hopkins. Was the story where a couple of inventors came to us and gave us a disclosure of something that looked in those times, and this is around about 2003, 2005 area, basically a keyboard that was developed on a piece of glass. And they said that this is a medical device, and it is actually meant to be for people that have issues with, in those days, the clunky keyboards they used to have in pressing the space bar. And it looked like as though the technology was something that had only applications with very limited number of people. And in the sense that it was a medical device, again, it was something only meant to be for people that had disabilities, but not recognizing that this could eventually go and become a big blockbuster, which I'll tell you in a little bit. We thought that it would probably be best to ask the inventors as to what they want to do with it. So they ended up wanting the technology dearly, and eventually started a business called Fingerworks. And that business didn't quite do very well and had a pretty rough start in the beginning, but eventually somehow in a very spurious manner, the inventors wanted to get ownership of the patent that we had filed from our office, which they eventually got for a sum of money, only to turn around and sell the technology to Steve Jobs, which was integrated into the first iPhone that he developed, and then broke away the portion of the BlackBerry screen that was there, and is now called the touchscreen technology as we all know it today.
Oh, wow. So, that's some story.
And that was obviously an infamous story, as we call it, but of course we've come around it.
Wow.
We've come around it. And I keep telling that story, not just because of the fact that we were pleasantly surprised to see the acumen and the interest of the inventors who actually wanted to start a business around it. And the fact that they still had hope that this technology will be of some value. Eventually, obviously, they did a fantastic job in getting the technology taken off by Apple. And then, of course, it is right now one of the most ubiquitous technologies that we all use. But I think what I wanted to drive is the fact that the impact that these two inventors had and the passion that they had for this technology was something that eventually was of value. So I always, going forward, taking that story in mind, the first thing I do is to eventually ask the inventors that come to us with the invention disclosure as to whether they are interested to start a business around it at all. And this is somewhat to poke them and to tease them and find out how much they would want to put their own money into their own innovation if they want to eventually start it.
Skin in the game type of thing. Yeah.
That's right. And again, I have stories after stories, and I don't want to bore you with many. I can obviously provide you with discussions at the later time. But I've always found that when innovators are very passionate about the technology and they see value in terms of its impact, I think they've always been successful in, or either they themselves by virtue of starting a business around the technology, if they have the capacity to do it, or through the tech transfer office being successful in getting the technology out of the door and in the commercial marketplace. So that is always a good determinant for me. And I've seen this, like I said, in all the universities I've worked, and there are various stories like the one I just mentioned about the touchscreen, where the innovators have been of value in trying and driving one. And one I want to just mention quickly is again, I'm not naming names, but the inventor was a registered nurse, and she had developed a wearable simulation device for training healthcare practitioners. And she just felt that It's a good technology, and these would be simulation devices that would be for birthing or for catheterization or IV application or tracheostomy. And when she came, she was completely naive, had no idea, but she was so passionate that she eventually took that technology away, and it's one of the very successful startup businesses by the name Avkin right now that's doing very well. So again, the personality of that innovator was such that eventually had led to a success. And like I said, I could talk about various other stories, but at the end of the day, I think the belief in the technology by the innovator is a good determinant, in my opinion, for a tech transfer professional to see how much there is power in the technology and the innovation.
Now, was that last innovation by the nurse that you mentioned from Johns Hopkins?
No, this was still in University of Delaware. It does take a while for them to eventually get it to commercial marketplace. So this probably happened about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, actually, I'd say, from University of Delaware.
So are there any innovative breakthroughs or initiatives from JHU that you're particularly proud of that you want to talk to us about?
Yeah, there's several. Again, to go back to the GHU story, and I know you've done a podcast with Christy Weiskill, the director of Johns Hopkins Technology Business. I'm sure she must have told you a lot of stories. But again, we have, to just step back a little bit, Johns Hopkins University is among, one of the oldest universities that has been established back in 1876. But one of the uniqueness about the university is it was the first of America's university that had research as a component of the university. So again, believe it or not, there was a time when universities were only for education and didn't have any research component. But in 1876, again, that was changed with the university starting research. So we have a long history of research, and obviously with that comes innovation. And at this point in time, of course, we do research in the order of $3.4 billion, which is the highest in the last 4 to 6 years that any university in the world has. So obviously with that comes all the innovations. And just like I mentioned, we get invention disclosures in the order of, more than 400 every year. And many of the innovations you can see at various places. We're very proud to say that at the Time Best Innovations, also, in the Time magazine that comes out, we were there successfully in the year 2022 by an innovation that was called the Tasty Tape, which is an edible tape that holds a burrito together. So it's simple, but it's complicated in the sense that it had to eventually go through a lot of hoops to make it to where it is. It's not in the commercial pipeline just yet, but it is a group of students that developed it and is available right now. It has been licensed, but it's kind of in the works for it to be available for consumers, and was highlighted in Time for its best innovation. We have the TREWS, which is the Targeted Real-Time Early Warning System that Hopkins has developed, which is also something that we have done very proudly of. As you know, Johns Hopkins has been active in creating a global tracking dashboard during the COVID-19 pandemic. So Hopkins took a lot of activities upon itself to try and take all the data that was available into a tracking device. Again, this had an impact value, but not so much a commercial value, but this was great. But again, historically, if you go back, there's some great innovations like the invention of Saccharin, for instance. The rubber gloves that are used by surgeons have been developed by Johns Hopkins, and a whole bunch of others that I can mention. At this point in time, of course, medical robotics is big at Johns Hopkins, and the smart tissue autonomous robot, which is called the STAR, is a device that can perform complex surgical tasks and with great precision. And so that is another innovation that's coming in the works, and we are doing quite a bit of activities around it. And we have, roughly a dozen startups that are incubated on a regular basis. So again, there's a whole slew of information that I can provide you with these. But again, I don't want to inundate you with those. But again, there's a lot that's going on in Hopkins right now in the innovation space that we are very proud of.
Yeah, there's a long, broad history of innovation coming out of Johns Hopkins, that's for sure. So, Joy, maybe taking a step back and looking at a little bit more broadly, what do you think are some of the most exciting trends happening right now in academic tech transfer that are boosting innovation?
Right, Lisa, that's a good question. And tech transfer in general, if you look at it, is sort of a moving target. So again, if I just recollect my days when I started as a technology transfer professional, I was a puny licensing associate, and my job was basically to file patents and look for licensees, and that was the end of the story. Once the license was done, it was I'm looking for the bonus that I would get from my office. So that's pretty much the extent of the work it was. But of course, it has eventually evolved a lot, and some of the stalwarts in tech transfer now believe that we have gone through 5 generations of technology transfer process and methodologies, and so there's a lot that has gotten integrated into the tech transfer professionals besides just licensing patents. And so that has sort of happened because of the fact that there's, again, a lot of functionality that has been integrated into technology transfer now, as we see. And those functionalities really are sort of revolving around the fact that the world is also getting smaller. So everything is sort of getting at a global scale. We are no more confined to only the US jurisdiction, even though most of the patents are filed US only. But then we are always taking a look at a lot of things holistically. And then one of the attributes also that has come into play, aside from the global marketplace that we look for most of our collaborations, is that we are trying to collaborate with other global entities as well. So there is not just interaction between scientists and academicians within the US to develop innovations, but it's also outside. So there's a lot of interdisciplinary and global collaborations that going on, which is making the entire course of innovation more and more complicated. So because we are sort of centric towards IP, the ramifications of how we eventually get these IP languages eventually carved out and created, and who owns these pieces of innovations and how they get licensed off, is really getting to be a little bit of a hairball of an issue, and complications are arising. But having said that, of course, we are in the profession of trying to get it better. But if you look at it from a very broad perspective, and if I can just highlight a few of the things that we are right now looking into as far as the exciting happenings are concerned. So there is an increased focus of interdisciplinary research, as we mentioned, not just US, but globally. And so when we say interdisciplinary, we are not just talking about interactions between universities and other universities, but universities and companies. Universities are now trying to develop consortium models. So it's not just one, but several universities with several companies. And so these consortium models, so centers of excellence models, is just obviously creating a little bit of a whirlwind as to how you eventually handle some of these technologies as they come out of there. There is obviously a growing emphasis on entrepreneurship and startup culture. I think that's something we are seeing. So many universities are leaning more and more towards having the technologies taken off by startups, and the entire machinery that is needed for the startups to happen. I think the tech transfer offices are taking on those type of things. And then, of course, public-private partnerships itself. So again, the federal government is insisting, as you know, NIH is proposing a lot of things in the space where they're not just going to be providing direct money to universities for doing the research, but would be doing it only when we have private partnerships that is enabling these researches to happen. So again, that throws in a little bit more of a complexity in the way we handle things. There's a lot of open innovation happening, crowdsourcing happening. And in general, again, because of these tech transfer offices are developing different models and practices, which is, again, a moving target. And as Autumn, as one of the pioneering associations that handles many of these tech transfer professionals are going into our regular meeting, with education being one of the cornerstones of its association values. We are seeing that education around the nuts and bolts of how tech transfer offices models are changing is also coming in play. So I think it's a very complicated mishmash of things that's happening right now. And I haven't, of course, spoken about all the newer technologies like AI, for instance, and then machine learning, and all the other attributes of technology that are coming into the pipeline, which are completely disruptive, and we have never handled them before. And so the policy affairs and and stuff to do with our relationship with how we eventually control its ethical matters is all kind of getting wrapped into it. So again, a long answer to a short question, but just to give you a glimpse of what the complexity is going to be coming down the pike as we move forward is sort of being bestowed here.
Yeah. And to your point, it is getting just more and more complex all the time. And like you said, everything's a mismatch of different things going on everywhere. And, that leads me to ask you, what do you think that universities can do in terms of maybe practical steps and maybe not only universities, but tech transfer offices can do to create a culture that encourages and rewards innovation amongst faculty and researchers? We've alluded to a little bit so far, but I wonder if you have some specific ideas.
Right. And again, for the most part, it's just that the faculty members have to be well appraised of what's going on. I think that's really critical because they are, at the end of the day, the innovators. So to me, they always have to be treated with a little bit of TLC, tender, loving, caring attribute, because you have to realize that they do multifunctional work. They have the educational component, the research component. Tech transfer is really something on the side for them. And yet they, like I mentioned, they have to be in the mix to get their innovations into the commercial pipeline. And then they have to continue to come to us, feeding us with newer innovations to come. So for universities to make sure that the faculty members are not deprived of everything that they need, we need to continue to educate them. And we are obviously, it's again, like I mentioned, it's not it's a unidirectional office where we take the invention disclosure file patents and look for licensee. There's a lot of attributes that have gotten into the process of tech transfer, and we need to make sure that the faculty recognizes it and understands it. Obviously, one of the vehicles and machinery of commercialization of these innovations, as we mentioned, is through startups. And who better can eventually be a champion for these startups other than the faculty member themselves or their students. So all the bells and whistles that go and the infrastructure that the university has created to assist with the innovators to start up a business is something that needs to be well appraised to the faculty, because many times they don't even understand what they have for the offering and how much the university is providing them with support that they need to eventually develop these startups. So they have to be eventually given that kind of an educational discourse. So as a practice, for instance, I personally go out for these road shows, meet with faculty, walk down the hall, tell them about all the opportunities they have, the extra grants that they have, the support system from entrepreneurs that have been hired by us to assist them with advisory benefits, such that they realize that there is an army of strength that they can eventually gather by assisting or getting integrated with us. And then, of course, at the end of the day, we have to recognize them and provide incentives. And every university does it differently, obviously. So in every way that tech transfer offices can help them getting the recognition and the feeling that whatever they've done for us is something that is of value to them is critical. So we want to make sure that we have innovation awards. We have days when we felicitate them, provide them with support, even putting small articles in our newsletter with all the success stories that they've eventually done or helped us with helps. So again, the culture is the most difficult part of this entire picture, and yet it's important that we keep proactively helping them, assisting them, and educating them with all the affiliations that they can eventually get and assistance they can get. And that's, I think, critical for encouraging them and rewarding them for the innovation that they've provided to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joy, I wanted to ask you, looking ahead a little bit, what emerging trends or technologies do you see shaping the future of innovation in academia?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I think there is a lot coming down the pike. AI is, of course, the main one. AI and machine learning. That's and if you've been following some of the e-group discussions at Autumn, we are still sort of at very early stages, and it's a very rapidly moving technology area. So we want to make sure that we do it and do it well. And of course, there is the other component that we don't talk of very much, and because we are all good people and we always think highly of these technologies, but these technologies can very well be misused. So anything to do with the space of cybersecurity that goes in complements with AI is something that we have to obviously be very mindful of, and I think tech transfer will be in that space. In the biotechnology and genomic space, of course, we are talking about a lot in the space of personalized medicine. So obviously the CRISPR technology has been great. But again, just in the same flavor as AI, there is a lot that can happen coming down the pike, as we get into the space of personalized medicine, and that's sort of coming up pretty quickly. And we have to make sure that those are, attributes that tech transfer officers have taken care of as they move forward with. A lot of stuff happening in the advanced materials and nanotechnology space as well. That is another space that we are growing with 3D printing. A lot in the electronics and healthcare space. Obviously, there's energy manufacturing. So again, when we talk about composition of matter, as we discussed in the beginning of the discussion, how do we eventually handle it and make sure that we have these new composition of matters well protected, such that they can eventually hit the commercial pipeline? Data science, big deal. Again, I mentioned a little bit about the ethical and responsible innovation responsibilities that we have. So I think in general, again, not just one, but a laundry list that I could talk of. It's a big sized bite for us to handle. But I think if you look at it holistically, it does look intimidating. But I think taking these one at a time and then handling them slowly but carefully is probably the way to go.
Absolutely. And how do you think these trends are going to influence the role of TTOs and their strategies for tech transfer going forward?
I think things will become complicated. It will be more sophisticated. Tech transfer generation, if we are generation 5, generation 6 and 7 will be way more complicated for sure. And with it comes the personnel and then the human resource. So folks that will be joining tech transfer will not be as naive and simple as they would be. And so I think that it's going to be a profession in and of itself. So whenever I give these discourses, not just within US, but outside globally, I tell many younger folks that very soon this will become a household name. And I can almost assure you, because it will be, I think, a career that people will pursue, not because they fell onto the lap as you and I probably did in our younger days, but it probably will be a career path that people will have to take. I personally think that it is always a combination of business, legal, and technical knowledge. But I think this combination of the three acumen, and these are the hard, obviously, skills, and then there's a whole bunch of soft skills that somebody has to have, will have to be something that has to be taken more seriously. And I think the next generation of tech transfer professionals will be much better, versed with how to handle these situations as we pass on the baton to the next generation.
Well, Joy, this has been a fascinating discussion talking about innovation. Thank you so much for your time today and for your insights. And also, you're the chair-elect of Autumn, so this is the first chance I've had on the podcast to say congratulations.
Thank you, Tisa.
Joy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure our listeners have taken away valuable lessons on fostering innovation in their own institutions. For our audience, please don't forget to subscribe to Autumn on the Air for more great conversations like this one.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.